Today I am bringing you my first reading wrap-up of 2026. We are going to be talking about the books that I read in January, and we're also going to be talking about some books that I read towards the end of last year, because this is the first reading wrap-up that I filmed since October. I was feeling a bit overwhelmed towards the end of last year, so I decided to stop doing wrap-ups temporarily. I am bringing them back for 2026, but there's a few books that I read towards the end of last year that I really loved. I gave them 5 stars, and I might have talked about them in vlogs and stuff. One actually I don't think I've talked about yet on my channel. I'm not going to talk about every single book that I read in November and December because that would be a very long video. So we are going to get stuck into my January reading wrap up. Let me know in the comments, what was your favourite book, or what was your most disappointing book that you read in January? Mine is the first book that we're going to be talking about, and it is Don't Swipe Right by L.M. Chilton. I actually started this towards the end of December. I needed a new audiobook and I finished it in the first few days of January. The reason I picked this up is because it's narrated by one of my favourite audiobook narrators, Georgia Maguire, and the first half was actually kind of fun. It's following this woman called Gwen who went through a breakup a few months ago, and she joined a dating app, has been out on a few dates with various guys, and she finds out that someone is seemingly killing these guys that she's been on dates with, and she is the police's prime suspect because she seems to be the only thing connecting these guys. What I think the author did do well is establishing various suspects in this mystery. There's various characters, there's various directions that this could have gone in, so I felt like it kept me on my toes in that sense, and I wouldn't say that it was strictly predictable. However, at one point in the book I considered something. I thought, I wonder if this is the direction that it's going in, and I put it to the back of my mind because I had loads of other theories that I was working on, and then I got to a reveal that made me think, oh no, okay, this is the direction it's going in, and I think this is something that I'm gonna hate. And I did. I hated the ending of this. It didn't make sense. Like, the characters' actions, and it annoys me when characters put themselves in situations that make no sense. Like, no real person would act the way that this main character acted. It's annoying because it was the first book that I technically finished in 2026, but I'm not seeing it as a bad omen because it's my worst book that I've read this month. So the only way's up from here. I'm glad we've got that out of the way to start with. The next book that I finished in January was Deep Cuts by Holly Brinkley. I always forget this author's name and it's really annoying. This follows a main character called Percy who, at the start of the book, she's in her early 20s, she's in college, and she meets a guy in a bar. They strike up this conversation about music. From there it develops into a friendship. He's a musician, he writes his own songs, and she is the person that he goes to when he wants critique on those songs. She seems to help him do better because she has a real ear for music and what works. You start to follow them throughout the years, and it is very character driven. It's about this dynamic, this relationship between these characters. What this book does really well is showing the passion that the main character Percy has for music, showing the connection between these two characters and their flaws. I think if you like books like Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin, or Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors, those kind of books about characters that have layers and it gets really messy, I think this could be a book for you. I gave it 4 stars. While I liked the nostalgia, it's set in the early 2000s. I liked following a main character who was passionate about something. However, I also felt like the main character didn't go through much character development throughout the book. She felt kind of stuck, and I didn't love the ending. A large part of this is set in New York though, and New York is one of my favourite cities, so it's a place that I enjoy reading about in fiction. Cursed Daughters by Oyinkan Braithwaite was my favourite book in January. I gave this 5 stars. This is by the same author who wrote My Sister the Serial Killer, a book that I read years ago before I had even heard of BookTube, and I do sometimes question the books that I enjoyed before I started making content online. I question how my memory is of those books because I don't have notes or videos that I can refer back to, but I know that I liked the writing in My Sister the Serial Killer, and I really liked the writing in Cursed Daughters. I did listen to this on audio audio, and I would recommend the audiobook. There's different narrators who voice the different characters, and I think they did such a great job of bringing the characters to life. This is set in Nigeria, and it follows women of this particular family who believe that there is a curse that has been placed on their family. If you go back through the generations to the woman where the curse originated, since then no woman in this family has been able to maintain a relationship with a man. Something has always gone wrong. I think the exact wording of the curse is that no man will call your house his home. At the start of the book, one of the women of this family gives birth to a daughter, and everyone comments on how much this daughter looks like her aunt who passed away. So you get the perspective of the daughter as an adult, you also get the perspective of her mom, and you also get the perspective of the aunt who you know passed away before the start of the book, but it goes back to the 90s and you see her story, and there are some really sad, tragic moments throughout this. I think the curse element was really well done because it really shows how the different women of this family react to this curse and how that curse impacts their view on relationships, how it influences them, maybe without them even realising. It's really a book about the repercussions of your actions and how your actions can have repercussions for future generations and how things can be passed down. I felt really invested in all of these characters, and I don't think I fully appreciated how much until I started crying. There were some quite emotional moments throughout this book, and I think it was really well done. I really appreciate books that focus on family dynamics, and especially books that focus on sister relationships or sister adjacent relationships. We almost have two sets of sisters in this, and I think that, yeah, the relationships in this were so complex and layered and messy, but in a way that was really captivating. Half His Age by Jeanette McCurdy is a new release that I was very curious about. I read this author's memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, a few years ago, and I can remember saying at the time that if she ever published a fiction book, I would be really interested in picking up because I think she has a very distinctive voice, and I think this book did have a very distinctive voice. If you don't know, this is a character study following a 17-year-old girl who develops an obsession with one of her teachers that eventually develops into a relationship. When I picked this up, it had only just come out and I'd only seen one review for it, so I wasn't sure what to expect. It's interesting because I've since seen this everywhere, but when I picked this up, I was expecting it to feel similar to My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, and while they are both about student-teacher relationships, I think Half His Age is very different tonally. This main character describes herself as white trash. She grew up in a trailer park. She has a mom that has been neglectful and absent. Her mom doesn't have the most healthy view on relationships, and you can see throughout the first part of the book, in fact throughout the whole book, you can really get a sense for who Waldo is as a person and how her past experiences have shaped who she is, her view of the world. You can see that she's trying to fill a void in her life. I think this is a book that asks you to have a lot of compassion for this character who is only 17. She's turning 18 in the book. It expects you to look outside of the main character's narrow view and actually observe as an outsider and think, okay, I understand why she is acting the way that she is, but I am reading this thinking this guy is married, he is her teacher, he's twice her age, and yet he is going along with things. He's taken advantage of the situation because he's miserable in his own life. It has this very sharp writing style. The sentences are very short and snappy and sarcastic. It's also got very short chapters. I think this was a 4.5-hour audiobook, and it has over 90 chapters. It moves very quickly. It feels very compulsively readable, very compelling. I just didn't like the writing style. It's very graphic, very crude, and I think maybe if I was reading it physically, that wouldn't have affected me as much. It wasn't so much that it made me feel uncomfortable because it's meant to make you feel uncomfortable, and I felt uncomfortable reading My Dark Vanessa, but I think My Dark Vanessa handled things with a bit more nuance. Half His Age, like I said, it felt very different tonally, and the tone wasn't my preference, but that doesn't mean that I didn't appreciate what the book was trying to do. Apologies if the camera angle has changed. I just had to delete some stuff from my memory card and swap out my camera battery. I promise I did prepare for this video. I talk too much, okay? This is why I sometimes feel stressed stressed when I'm filming wrap-ups because I know that it's going to take me longer than I'm expecting. But the next book that I have to talk to you about is Nowhere Burning by Catriona Ward. This is a new release that's coming out in February. I received an advanced copy through NetGalley and I was so excited to pick this up. This is very hard-hitting. I would describe it as literary fiction with horror elements and darker elements. That's actually how I would describe all of Catriona Ward's books. I think her books often get categorised as horrors or thrillers, but I would say she writes literary fiction with darker elements. The Last House on Needless Street is probably her most popular book. Actually my least favourite. I still enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I've just enjoyed the atmosphere of her other books a little bit more. And what I really like about her writing is how she is quite experimental. She plays with perspective, she plays with timelines, she deliberately does stuff to make you feel confused and like you're in a dream. In this, we're following 2 children, Riley and Oliver. Riley is 14 and her younger brother is 7. And after their mom passed away, they were sent to live with their cousin who has been abusing them. One night, Riley realises that she needs to get them out of this situation, and so she takes her brother, they run away and head to this place called Nowhere, which is where children have created a community. Children who have been through unimaginable trauma, who have had to run away from home. They've created this community in this place that's in the Rocky Mountains. It's on the grounds of a ranch or a house that used to be home to a killer. I think this is being marketed as Peter Pan meets Lord of the Flies, and I can kind of see that vibe. It actually reminded me of The Beach by Alex Garland, which was also turned into a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. Obviously very different in terms of the story. It felt similar to me. It's been a long time since I read that book or even watched that film, but there was something about it that felt familiar. Very much about trauma and how these characters have never found somewhere that they can call a home. I gave this 4 stars. I really liked the atmosphere and the setting felt very alive and immersive. I felt like I was there. The main reason it wasn't a 5 stars is because I found certain characters' actions difficult to understand. I can understand when a child is impulsive and erratic and making quick decisions because I think that's kind of realistic. However, when it's an adult, when I'm struggling to understand why an adult is doing what they're doing, that's when it kind of loses me. Also, the ending to me felt a bit rushed and there was one element that I found completely unbelievable. So gave it 4 stars. Overall, I had a really good time reading it. It is quite hard hitting and it's quite heavy though, so just bear that in mind if you are thinking of picking this up. But I think if you've enjoyed any of Catriona Ward's other books, then I think you could enjoy this one. Next up we have The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. This is the 4th and final book in the Wayfarers series. I am thinking about doing a whole video with like a guide to the Wayfarers series if anyone is interested in that, because this is one of my favourite series of all time. It's a cozy sci-fi series, and what I like about it is that even though there's 4 books, each book has its own self-contained plot. I would still recommend reading them in order because the first book does a good job of establishing a universe and all of the different, or at least some of the different alien races, but I think that it's good if you don't want to commit to reading books in a series back to back. I think you can leave a decent amount of time in between books and it's not going to affect your enjoyment. The way that I like to pitch this series is imagine it's way in the future, hundreds if not thousands of years in the future. Humans have left the Earth, gone out into the galaxy and become part of the galactic community. Throughout the series, one of the main themes is the importance of respecting other cultures and communicating and understanding. This book, I think, does something a little bit different to the others in that it's set on this planet that is known for being somewhere that people stop off on their way to somewhere else. It happens to be in a part of the galaxy where there's a lot of traffic that's coming through. One of the first characters that you're introduced to owns a spaceport on this planet, and at the start of the book she has 3 guests who have stopped there for a few hours before they continue on with their journeys, but something happens that leaves them stranded there. There's very little plot. I think out of all of the books in this series it has the least amount of plot. It's very much about these characters getting to know each other. And what I think it does really well is it shows how some of these characters are seen as being rebels to their culture. There are characters who have gone against what is considered normal within their species, or they are considering doing something that would be unimaginable. It's a very quiet story. It's also, I think, one of the shortest books in the series, and I liked how we were following a close, small group of characters. It talks a lot about parenthood. In particular, the character who owns the spaceport has a teenager, a child, who seems to be going through adolescence, and there were just some great moments between the characters. One moment in particular where they were talking about cheese, because none of these characters are human, they're all alien. I found that quite funny, and it just gave me that heartwarming feeling, which is what I love about this series. So I gave this one 5 stars. It wasn't the strongest 5 stars. I think my favourite books in the series are still book 2 and book 3. I can't decide between book 2 and book 3. They were both, all the books in this series were 5 stars, and that's why it is a series that I would recommend, but only if you're okay with basically no plot. It's very much about the characters. Back in December, I also read To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This was actually the last book that I read in 2025. I buddy read this with my partner, and I was a little bit confused when I first heard about this book, because on UK Amazon you can buy a box set that has the 4 Wayfarers books plus To Be Taught If Fortunate. So I assumed it was part of the same series, but it's not, I don't think. You could consider it a prequel, but I couldn't see any connection, and my partner has never read the Wayfarers series and had no trouble understanding what was happening. This is following a group of 4 astronauts who go on a mission out into space to explore and to gather data. That is their mission. They're not there to do anything other than gaining knowledge, and that is really quite key to the story. It touches on the ethics of space exploration, and this is so short, I don't want to say too much, but I thought the writing was beautiful. I thought the writing in this was actually much more poetic in comparison to the writing in the Wayfarers series, maybe because it is a lot shorter. Has made me intrigued to read other books by Becky Chambers. I mean, I was intrigued anyway, but I actually DNF'd Psalm for the Wild Built when I first tried to read it a few years ago, and I really want to go back to it because I think I could really like Becky Chambers' short fiction. I'm having a bit of a nightmare with filming this video. My camera battery has just run out again, and I don't know what's happening because I thought it was fully charged, and normally it lasts for an hour, but that only lasted 10 minutes, so I don't know what's going on. But I only have a few more books left to talk about, and the next book I'm not even going to really talk about because it's book 9 in a series. I actually spent most of January reading this book, Dust of Dreams by Stephen Erickson. It's book 9 in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. I do have a full spoiler video if you have read this series, or if you haven't and you just want to hear my spoilery thoughts, then I'll leave that linked. This wasn't my favourite, and I think some of that is down to this being the first part of the end. There's an author's note at the beginning where Stephen Erickson talks about how he wanted book 9 and book 10 to be one volume, but it was too long, and so the publisher asked him to split it. So it's the only Malazan book that has a less satisfying ending, but I have already started book 10 in the series. I am, I think, about 15% of the way through, and I'm enjoying it a lot better. So that's the main thing. Finally, I'm just going to quickly tell you about some books that I read towards the end of last year, as I promised. First up, we have Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is a book that I think I read back in November. I listened to it on audio, which is how I've consumed all of Tiffany D. Jackson's books that I've read, and the audiobook narrator was really good. This is a YA mystery following a girl who, I can't remember how old she is, Claudia is her name. At the start of the school year, her best friend Monday doesn't show up at school, and Claudia is desperately trying to find out what's happened to her friend. She's talking to the adults in her life, her parents, her teachers, and no one seems to be as concerned as she is. It's very hard-hitting, and I think it's one of those books where even if you don't typically read a lot of YA, I think you would still really appreciate what the author is trying to say through this book. The Compound by Aisling Rawle is a book that actually ended up on my favourite books of the year list. I was trying to decide between this and the final book that I'm going to tell you about, but I decided to go with The Compound because this is my taste in dystopian fiction. It's marketed as Love Island meets Lord of the Flies, which I think is accurate. However, I also think that with it being about reality TV, it might set a certain expectation that this is going to be really fun and a bit trashy, and that's not the case. The main character that you're following is Lily, and she wakes up in this compound in the desert and is taking part in this reality show. She has applied to be on this reality show, so it's not a surprise to her that she's woken up there, but immediately it sets you on edge because she's walking around this compound with these other women, and this place is trashed. It's described as being dirty, the door is missing, and they're all just like, oh yeah, this is fine, this is expected. As the reader, I'm thinking, what's going on? You are basically following this group dynamic and how they are taking part in these challenges in order to win prizes, group challenges as well as personal challenges. And I think it is so clever in the way that it shows the reality TV side of things, but also it's a character study. It's a study of this group dynamic and the different roles that they fall into. I think if you like dystopian fiction, then I think you would really appreciate this. This is another one that I listened to on audio, and I thought the audiobook was very well done. The final book on my list is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, another dystopian, because apparently I read a lot of those towards the end of last year. This is following a main character who is a teenager. You're not really sure how old she is, but she is being kept in a bunker with a group of other women, and they are being guarded by guards, men who are patrolling around the outside. None of them know why they're there, and what is unique about this main character is she's the only person out of this group who doesn't remember a time before this bunker. And she feels kind of left out because these women are refusing to talk to her about this time before. What I liked about this is that it's very thought-provoking. I actually read it in one sitting because there's no chapter breaks, and I was quite a while into the book before I realised that. There are breaks in the text and stuff like that where you could pause. I got to a certain point in the book where something happened and I thought, oh, okay, this is interesting. I'm just gonna keep reading a little more. And then something else happened and I realised I was gonna finish the whole book. So I read it in one sitting. I think it's less than 200 pages. I think this would be a great book to read as part of a discussion and to talk about with other people because it raises a lot of questions. And I think it's down to you as the individual to come up with your own answers and to theorise on so many different things. I feel like this isn't a book that I should have loved as much as I did. It's one that has grown on me. It's one that has stuck with me. Once again, it's not really a plot heavy book, and I'm finding that a lot of the books that I'm reading recently are more character driven, but I tend to be enjoying them. So that does conclude my January reading wrap up plus a few other recent reads. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. Apologies that the camera angle and the lighting has probably been all over the place. This has been a bit of a stressful video to film, but not too much because, you know, I'm trying not to bring stress into my booktube life in 2026. I'm trying to just take it easy and take things as they come. But please let me know in the comments what was your favourite book that you read in January? What was your least favourite book that you read in January? Did you have any disappointments? Let me know if you've read any of the books that I've talked about and what you thought of them. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me. But otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.